All right, again, if you're following along, I'm now up to the middle of page 23. The good news is this is very short, what we're going to talk about right now, okay? All right, and that is a one-to-one relationship. Now, I don't disagree with what the author says here. They say, suppose that some products have optional data. That's one reason that you might have a one-to-one relationship. Another one is what I mentioned before. You just decide that you're working with a table, and you just make the decision the table's too big, and you want to separate it into two tables, for example. All right, that's a one-to-one relationship. So if you look at the example that's right here, this is the table that you're going to build here, product details. And notice they both have the railroad tracks. That means there is a one-to-one relationship between these two tables. That means that every one product detail record corresponds to exactly one product record, and every one product record corresponds to exactly one product detail record. That's what one-to-one means. All right. So if we look at that example, they have you create another table called product details. So I'm going to highlight that, copy it to the clipboard. Notice that right now, if I do show tables, I have three tables. I do not have one called product details. I do now. So if I show tables now after putting that in, I now have four tables. All right. And once I go there, I could do the show create table, but that's no biggie one way or the other. All right. That's all the author shows you on this. Most people will tell you that try to avoid having one-to-one relationships between your tables. It's not that it's wrong, but typically there's a better way to do it than that. All right? Now, starting on page 24, we just did this. We did this when we started, the backup and restore. I showed you how to do that already, so I'm not going to run through that again. Last week, we went through part 4, more on the primary key, foreign key, and index, so we've done that. All right. Now, I'm not going to go over this more SQL. I'm not going to do that. All right, we're going to do that tomorrow. But I'd like to at least talk a little bit about section 6 here. Section 6 starts, it's a ways down, I guess. It starts on page 's called More on Join, and out of the 44 pages, 35? Thank you. You're right. Starts on page 35. So the first thing they talk about in here is an inner join. I don't want to just, I probably have confused enough of you going over this stuff, and I don't want to do any more. So I'm going to talk about this stuff. I'm not going to demo it and whatever right now, but I just want to talk about it because the examples they have here are not great for this. All right. What they have you do here, like I said, the examples are kind of goofy. Notice they have you create two tables. They're called T1 and T2. Then they have you put in data, ID1 and T1, ID2, etc. So if you look up on the screen here, these are what are in your two things of data. All right, right there. So here's your one table if you do this, and here's the other table. Okay, if we do all that stuff. Then if we do one of those Cartesian product joins, we get this. That's not what you'd want to do. All right? Instead, you would want to do something that looked like this. I'm going to let you run through those examples yourselves because this starts to get really confusing if it hasn't already. All right? Now, they also talk about left join and right join. And those are important because of this. Anything that you have in there that's no. All right? If I combine two tables, so let's say I've got table T1 and I've got table T2. All right? when we did the equijoin that we just did before, first we did a Cartesian product join. So if this has 5 records in it, and this has 6 records in it, we do a Cartesian product join, we got 30, right? Because that was 5 times 6. And I said almost always that's going to be wrong. If I want to combine some information from T1 and T2, and I use that on statement or what I showed you before, we'll get 5 records back. We'll get those 5, plus whatever information we want from over here. Well, right now with what we've worked on, we've got nothing that has nulls in it. Did everybody hear what I said? We have nothing in our tables that have a null in them. If we had things that had null in them, so let's suppose that what we want to do here, let's say that these each do have 5. So there's 5 records in here, and there's 5 records in here. And we want to combine those. But as it turns out, in here, 3 of these have nulls in them. All right? If we do that equijoin that we looked at with the equal sign, we're only going to get 3 records back because equijoins don't work with nulls. Okay? If we choose, as they say here, a left join or a right join, we'll get everything back, including the nulls. Everybody see that? The difference between a left join and a right join is which table you save first. So notice here, they said select star from T1 left join, all right, or left join T2 on this. If we would have said the same exact query right here that you see, but we'd used the word right here, right, and we'd made that a right join on, and we'd flip the order, so we said T2 first, then T1, we get the same results. So all I'm trying to tell you is, when you use left joins or right joins, almost always the only time you will use those is if you have null records. And if you want to show everything, even things that don't match because of the word null, you use a left join or a right join. Now, if that confused you, I'm sorry. I'm not going to give you anything, at least in this example, where we're going to use left joins and right joins. But I would like you to read that, all right, because I think it'll help you. All right? What we will talk about tomorrow, I don't want to do it now, there's just too much to go over, is section 5. So when we go through section 5 tomorrow, we're going to first talk about subqueries. And if you didn't like queries, you'll hate subqueries, seriously. Because a subquery is a query inside of a query. You can do that. And we'll take a look at a fairly simple example, okay? And then after we go through subqueries, we'll talk about dates and times. If you please look up on the screen, remember, that's how MySQL shows dates. 4 digits for the year, followed by 2 digits for the month, followed by 2 digits for the day. Okay? Also, just so you know, it's not mentioned in here, there's another way you can do dates. What you can do is, over here where they show the month, instead of putting the month number, you can use a 3-letter abbreviation. So if it's January like that, you can put in Jan. This month is what? Now we're in April, you can put in APR. It'll take that too. All right? So we'll talk a little bit about dates and some of the date-time functions. Then we'll get into views. I showed you views last week. A view is when you save a query. So you give a query a name, and that becomes the name of the view. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. Then we'll talk about what are called transactions. And it's important that you understand commits and rollbacks. Imagine that I went to the bank, okay? And it was after hours. You ever do that where you fill out one of those envelopes and you put it in there? And let's say that what I did was I had my paycheck. I mean, I get it right now electronically, but let's just assume I don't. So I put in there my paycheck. And let's say that I'm living from paycheck to paycheck. So let's say the paycheck's for $500. And I've got 3 bills. I've got an electric bill, a gas bill, and some other bill, car payment, whatever. And they're $400 between them. Well, I'm going to be in trouble if those 3 bills go through the system and for some reason my deposit doesn't make it through. Would you agree with that? All right. So when you have a transaction, you put a bunch of stuff together. They can be a bunch of inserts and or a bunch of updates and or a bunch of deletes, but you put them together. And either all of them succeed, because it's one unit, that either all succeeds, or if anything breaks, none of it succeeds. Does that make sense? It's an all or nothing type of proposition. That's what we'll talk about with transactions. And then finally, they talk a little bit about user variables, and I don't know why she does. Okay? That'll be all I'm going through on here. They do have a section at the end. If you're interested, you could do it now, you can do it later. You can choose not to do it at all. It's your call. But starting on page 38 and through the rest of your handout, they've got exercises in here. And you could try them yourselves, but they give you all the answers for them too. So tomorrow morning, between hopefully 8 and about 9, we're going to finish this up by going through section 5. Then we're going to go in, if you look up on the screen here, when you get in, you're going to do this. So when you start here, you're going to come in here and you can either go to MySQL and click on admin to bring this up, or you can type in localhost/php myadmin. But either way, you're going to get to this. This is the semi-GUIized way of doing this. So we're going to create another database tomorrow, starting at about 9 o'clock, and it'll take the rest of the period. All right? But we're going to create it GUIized, like this. All right? We're going to do that as a class. Then what I'm hoping to do on Wednesday is to write out a bunch of, based on this database that we'll create tomorrow, write out a bunch of queries. And I'm going to give you like about a good hour to work on them. And then we're going to go through those as a class. Then Thursday, you're going to get your first worksheet, and I'm going to have you create the database. I'll tell you what's in it. I'll have you put in the records. I'll tell you what they are. And then I'll ask you a bunch of queries. And you'll have Thursday and Friday for most of the period, like we said, to work on that. And then we'll go a little further in that next week. All right, does all that make sense? So now you know what's going on for the rest of the week. All right, that's really all I have. So you've got an hour and 20 minutes to sit there and play around with this. Again, if you are totally lost, I'd suggest you go back to the beginning and start all over again. Remove everything that you have and just start all over again. I'm always going to try to give you an hour, if I can, a period to work on this.